Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet. Wait a minute, I tell you. You ain't heard nothing.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Recent Reads. In July, for my Chunksters Reading Challenge, I read Within a Budding Grove by Marcel Proust. It is impossible for me to tell you what it was about. It was about a lot of words which at times were just prosy and dreary and made me feel weary. When I read Swan's Way last year, I enjoyed it and gave it an A rating, but Within a Budding Grove just lacked the element of delight, and so I rated C. So after being wearied by Proust, I just couldn't face immediately reading The Gourmand's Way, which I had planned to do. So instead I decided to read Emma by Jane Austen for Jane Austen July, hosted by Katie at Books and Things. I will read The Gourmand's Way and the rest of Proust's In Search of Lost Time, but at some future time. Emma, I thought, was well plotted and clever, but this time of reading I noticed that all the main characters were irritating, each in their own way. I can't remember precisely what I thought of it when I first read it over 20 years ago, but I think that I was not overly impressed with it. Now I know why. Mr. Woodhouse is irritatingly self-centred and constantly refers to Miss Taylor as poor Miss Taylor because she got married. Mr. Elton is irritatingly foolish in thinking that Emma is interested in him. Mrs. Elton is irritatingly condescending and domineering. Miss Bates is irritatingly garrulous. Frank Churchill is irritatingly flirtatious. Jane Fairfax is irritatingly secretive. Harriet Smith is irritatingly naive. Mr. Knightley is an irritating lover, and it amazes me how he ever got out of the friend zone. And Emma is irritatingly snobbish and controlling. The only character who is not irritating is Robert Martin, and he's off stage for most of the novel. My rating for this novel was B, as I never intend to read it again. Anyway, Within a Budding Grove and Emma together totalled 887 pages, and I donated £12 to Book Aid International on completion. In July, I also read Work, A Story of Experience by Louisa Alcott, which was recommended to me by Amy of From the Dusty Bookshelf, and I read it in conjunction with the Louisa May 2020 read-along hosted by Megan Hannett and Kate Howe. The introduction says that Work does not have a plot, but I wouldn't have known this if I hadn't read about it. The theme of work that holds the book together I thought was a sufficient plot device, and I thought that Alcott handled it very well. A servant, actress, governess, companion, seamstress and nurse, Alcott transitions seamlessly from one occupation to the next. I was captivated throughout by this excellent novel, and I thoroughly enjoyed Alcott's exploration of social justice, women's work, domesticity and community through the experiences of Christie, her protagonist. I highly recommend this accomplished novel, and I rated it as A. Also, throughout the latter part of July and into early August, I read 3 novels in the Poldark series by Winston Graham, continuing my Chunksters Reading Challenge. The Angry Tide, the Stranger from the Sea, and The Miller's Dance were all excellently written and delightful to read, and I rated all 3 as A, and I donated £12 to Book Aid International on completion. Total donations to Book Aid International to date total £839. Thank you to everyone who has continued to participate in the Chunksters Reading Challenge and to donate to this great book-related charity. In July, I also read a theological work called God's Passion for His Glory by John Piper. The book contains the full text of a work by Jonathan Edwards, the 18th century philosopher and theologian, and a commentary by John Piper. Although I do not subscribe to Piper's or Edwards' Calvinism, the book lays out a convincing argument, howbeit as a complex philosophical treatise, that the end for which God created the world is for His glory. I admit to not fully grasping the complex philosophical arguments that Edwards uses to prove his points, but the biblical texts he points out in the latter half of his treatise is plain enough for me to grasp the full import of his argument. Basically, I understand that the greatest gift that God can impart to us is Himself. I was reminded of what God said to Abraham as early as Genesis 15. The word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, "Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward." I've come to appreciate and to understand that God has nothing greater to give us than Himself. Peter says something similar in his second epistle, "Whereby are given unto us exceeding great and precious promises, that by these ye might be partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through lust." Once a person comes to truly understand who and what God is and what His intentions are towards mankind in general, and the great gift of Himself He offers to everyone through His Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, is to realize that there is nothing greater to wish for. In July, I also read The Life of Samuel Johnson by James Boswell for Matthew of Maybury Book Club's read-along. I had read the first 500 pages of this biography over a period of 20 years, but I began from the beginning again and read it all through. I'm glad to have finally finished it, rather than to have been glad in the reading of it. I found it heavy-going at times due to its sporadic matter and method of treatment, which is episodic. Johnson is a very worthy character, but not a very likeable person, whereas Boswell is not a very worthy person, but is more likeable. I enjoyed Matthew's videos of his reading, and also Army, whose video essays are excellent. See the links in the show notes below for their playlists. My rating for this biography is B. In August, I finished reading As Thousands Cheer, The Life of Irving Berlin by Laurence Bergreen. I bought this biography on impulse after watching a video about Irving Berlin because his life sounded interesting as he lived to be 101. I read 4 or 5 pages every evening and I was absolutely delighted every time I picked up this book. Bergreen is everything a biographer should be. He brings Berlin alive on the page, so even though Berlin was a complete little shit, I found myself rooting for him at every stage of his career. He could be really nasty, self-centered and mean, but nothing less than fascinating throughout the course of his long and eventful life. I thoroughly enjoyed this biography and rated it as A. In August, I also read He Knew He Was Right by Anthony Trollope, and as Matthew commented, you can bet your life that he was absolutely wrong, and he was right. As usual in a Trollope novel, there are several subplots running throughout the novel, all of which I thoroughly enjoyed, but I hated the main plot and the main character, who is a thoroughly nasty piece of work with not a single redeeming feature. I read this novel over 20 years ago and remember not liking it, and now I know why. Trevelyan is a complete idiot, and I hated the way he treated his wife through his obsessive jealousy. I was reminded of Othello, but Othello was an admirable, noble and tragic character, whereas Trevelyan is wholly despicable, and when he dies it is somewhat of a relief for his put-upon wife and for this put-upon reader. So, in spite of Trollope's otherwise excellent treatment and enjoyable subplots, I never want to read this novel again, and so I rated it as B. I also read The Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy, and my impression was that events could quite easily have happened differently in this novel. I thought that it wasn't tragic enough. Yes, a couple of the characters died, but that is not necessarily artistically tragic. In fact, it wasn't. Wild Eve and Eustacia Vi just weren't tragic figures in the classical sense. They died by accident, so it was less than satisfactory as a tragedy. Not sure how and why Hardy had Eustacia chuck herself into the weir when she had arranged with Wild Eve to take her to Budmouth and then on to Paris, her heart's desire. It just wasn't tragic, so this is not my favourite Hardy novel, and I rated it as B. I also read 10 plays by William Shakespeare throughout July and August. 4 history plays, Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2, Henry V, and Troilus and Cressida. 4 comedies, The Merry Wives of Windsor, Much Ado About Nothing, As You Like It, and Twelfth Night, and 2 tragedies, Julius Caesar and Hamlet. And now here's a quick recap, and I'll be back sooner with another BookTube video.
Goodbye.